right, guys, welcome back to Total Disclosure with your host, Ty. Just got back from California. Super excited to have done what I just did. I had a great time. Although everything didn't go exactly as planned, most things went almost to plan. So I guess we call it a success. Before we get into tonight's show, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Help this content creator by if you want, becoming a member of the show, get exclusive access to shows, upcoming guests, one-on-one discussions, yearly gifts, and more. Also, all of our links are in the description below, as well as today's guests. And if you want to do us a favor, sign up for TubeBuddy, use code POP. And Movie Palette, use code Culture Corner 15. Movie Palette is so great. I got mine right here of Captain America Winter Soldier. It's one of my favorite little pictures because it's the whole movie put onto picture in sequential form. So nobody even knows it's nerdy. So it's kind of cool. Before I get into that kind of stuff, I want to bring our guest Tom in. Tom looks like your video's having a little bit of trouble keeping up with you.
Yeah, who knows? It's chugging away. I'll figure it out. But what's going on?
How are you?
Happy to be here. Oh, dude, fantastic! This has been a wild week for me.
Yeah,
as I told you, George Knapp and Luis Elizondo followed me on Twitter, and I was like, "What is happening?"
Yeah, so now next step is to get to talk to them.
Yeah, I'm going for it. Seriously, yes.
Yeah, why not?
We're getting them on the show.
So, how was your week without me? I mean, I got to go shoot pretty much all I got, all I wanted to shoot. You know, after storyboarding, I got to do. There was like 17 hiccups.
Oh man.
Yeah, the ferry wouldn't let us to Catalina, so that was the biggest issue that we had to overcome. So,
oh my god.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you had a good time. My week was productive. Came up with some cool concepts for some videos to work on that I'm gonna let you in on and let everybody hear about. That I'm really, especially the next one's gonna be pretty exciting. It's gonna take a little while to make it, but it's gonna be a fun time.
Well, with that being said, our feature today is Astral from theastral.com and on Twitter. Astral, if you want to give us a little brief overview, just so our audience can hear, just exactly what you do and who you are, how you got into all this stuff.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me today.
Of course.
Ty and Tom, what's up?
What's happening?
My background is focused really on parapsychology, psi phenomenon, remote viewing, the experiencer side. I recently got into UFOs and UAP phenomenon just through my research into these topics. So I'm coming in at a little bit different angle from having the experiencer side in terms of psychic phenomenon. So that's really been my main interest. Learning a lot about the nuts and bolts has been, my light just fell. So the psychic phenomenon, it's already happening, right? But yeah, thanks for having me on. I like the show, a lot of the conversation here, and looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, man, and I've only really engaged with you on Twitter after coming into the community a little bit more. And what fascinated me was when I dug into the UFO stuff, right? Because I've always been interested in the otherworldly and, could life exist on other planets, etc. So I go down the list. But I never was interested in humans. So the remote viewing and the precognition and ESP and, all that stuff, once I started diving into the UFO, UAP phenomenon, like hard, you start peeling back the layers and there's just so much more to it, whether it's our own government, doing experiments with remote viewing, our own government secretly investigating UFOs. What do you think the tie to all of this is?
I think the tie really to me is around consciousness and and really just how this has to do with either the research and what I really focused on, I guess, at what got me interested in all of this was I had a precognitive dream in which I got robbed. So I was going to college. I was studying audio engineering. And I got robbed. And 3 days later, the exact scenario took place of me coming home to my apartment finding all my equipment was gone, finding my backup hard drive was there in the dream that
No
I had.
way.
Wow.
And so
Like
15 years ago,
spot on?
yes,
Holy shit.
and it didn't hit me until after the fact. So the dream was not very much. I mean, it definitely hit me, but not until after the fact of it happening. And so after the traumatization of the event of me getting robbed, I look back and it kind of changed the course of my life of being focused on this psychic phenomenon.
Dude, now my
So
life
when I
is
moved to
hell.
North Carolina, I really got focused on the scientific research into like what's really going on behind this. And I found that parapsychology was where a lot of the focus was on like ESP, telepathy, clairvoyance, remote viewing, that sort.
Right. So how did it feel? I've always, when you had that initial dream and then you came home to almost, to the exact scene, what was your first feeling? Like, something's wrong with me? Am I going crazy? Like, because a lot of people think, or did you think it may be just coincidence until you started digging deeper into it?
I think that looking back at it, I've had 3 precognitive dreams in my life, and they all correlate with a very traumatic event that I've had. And so I think it's very personal. So to me, when I first arrived at my apartment and realized that the door was jabbed in like my apartment, so I running in and kind of realizing all that, the gravity of that situation hitting me, I think opened up a little bit of a communication and information, so that when I was dreaming, because I was interested in some of these topics already through just astral projection and dream documentation, just documenting your dreams. I think I was able to make that connection. And even through the experiences later on in my life, they have come from me looking back and through my dreams and being like, damn, like that shit actually happened, and making that connection. So I think it was pretty powerful and just crazy and kind of just what got me started. But I think there's a correlation between the UFO experiencers when they talk about just deeper experiences and like synchronicities with seeing UFOs, and a deeper when people talk about experiencers, I think they just limit that to like seeing a UFO, but I think it's very much a deeper experience.
This goes back, something that was shown to me again today is, the similarities between the fairy lore and the UFO lore, right? And how similar it all is in terms of the experiencer, right? So now the experiencer is where when they recant the story, retell the story, there's a lot of similarities. So as this phenomenon kind of just changed names throughout history of we perceived it one way, back then magic, and then God, and then now it's aliens. Could it just be natural progression as our consciousness expands and gets or evolves, if you will? Because in my opinion, we're not going to evolve too much more physically. It's going to be mentally, because we don't face too much challenge physically. We face it all mentally now.
Yeah, one of the one of my favorite words, I mean, one of the words that got me started on everything was astral. But another one was
Clearly.
psionic. Yeah.
Psionic.
Psionic. Now, what's
word.
psionic mean?
Psionic. Psionic is a sort of DNA progression that humanity would work towards as a recognition of this phenomenon like telepathy, ESP. So it's integrated within our DNA. And so as we go forward, it's not even questioned as it's, so we would be a psionic race. So a lot of people talk about telepathy and these experiences, but it would be when it would be at a point of accepted with these within our DNA.
Right. Now, do you think everyone has the ability to remote view? A lot of people talk about that, that everyone has the potential to like to have these abilities. It's just whether you tap into them. It's like, working out a muscle. Where do
Yeah.
you stand on that?
One of the people who I like to read about and follow is Joe McMoneagle, who is one of the remote viewers from the Stargate program. He talks about remote viewing kind of like taekwondo or karate, where everybody can
Exactly.
do it, but there's a lot of
Right.
people who progress and stick with it, like a musician. So there's people who have a natural talent for it, it seems, and others who could work towards it based off of how much they practice at it.
So Tom, what do you think about that specifically? Do you think that everyone has the ability, or that it's something that you're born with?
Well, if, after years of digging through literature about these subjects, I feel like everybody has the ability, but some people are born with the ability to do it better. Just like athletics, somebody could be born and they are just simply faster on their feet compared to somebody else. Right now, I'm currently using all of the tapes from the Monroe Institute and really diving into the gateway process,
Now,
which
what's
I'd
the
imagine
you
Astral's probably
both
very
nodded to
familiar.
each other on that, so I'm assuming that that is something of significance. In now, remember, I'm not exactly well versed in this world, so
Yeah,
you guys are kind of leading me down and teaching me today. So, if I'm asking dumb questions, it's only because I really don't know.
no,
No, I
ask
think
away, guy.
Monroe, yeah, Monroe, I feel like was on the cutting edge of really trying to explore if there were any influential ways to have an out of body experience or to have altered states of consciousness. Um, One of the things that at Monroe Institute and we were going to have a space to talk with the Monroe Institute on Twitter. They have actually a new Starline program, which is like their CE5. So it's a combination of their binaural beats and their program of music combined with, I guess it's like space sounds or sounds within this within space, and so they
Yeah.
use that to use the CE5. So it's interesting.
Well, no,
They're kind of on the cutting edge. Yeah,
isn't it crop circle sounds for
that's
CE5?
Greer. Yeah,
That's
so
Yeah,
Greer's
Greer
Greer.
side,
does
right?
that.
Yeah,
Greer's the
yeah.
crop circle
Yeah,
sound guy,
yep.
and then the other one. Okay, I see the difference. Okay, yeah. Speaking of Greer,
Mhm.
actually, we'll talk about him later because he did his. I had been saying, I was like, I haven't heard from him in a while, and I was like, Greer, and then all of a sudden, like, well, there he is, just like speak of the devil.
Well, that's like Elizondo. All of a sudden, he's like,
Yeah,
"Bam,
right.
I'm here."
Yeah, he came out of nowhere.
Literally came out of nowhere. But actually, matter of fact, with Greer and CE5, because human initiated contact, you'd have to assume plays a role in, all this consciousness stuff, right? I mean, Greer literally, you could break down to his beliefs down to consciousness, right? Most of the time. And consciousness is the key aspect to his narrative. And Greer's narrative is not a bad one. It's really not. If we take his word for it, he wants the human civilization to evolve into something peaceful without war, to join our cosmic brothers and sisters. Whether he's actually contacting aliens every day, I mean, that's a different story. And I don't like grifters like that, but everyone has to make it. Everyone has to make a living at the end of the day as well. But Dr. Greer is a certain someone that I find interesting. Now, what are your thoughts on him specifically?
I think that, and recently I had also Joseph Burks on a space, and we were asking about what the difference was between Heiss
Heist, yeah, and
and
C5.
CE5. But one of the things that I think I really want to focus on with a project that I'm working on personally is being able to test out protocols. If there's a scientific way to actually look at this, any way to have control groups to
Well,
send out.
That's what I've always
meditation or
said.
whatever it is, to test. Yeah.
That's what I've always said is why can't we why isn't someone peer reviewing CE5 or HEIS protocols so that we can understand, does it work or not? Like, can this be something that can be measured? Because, with all the stories that come out of these groups, you'd be, you know what I mean? You'd be remiss to say that it's not true, especially some of the video evidence as well. It's again, it all comes down to the experiencer, and that's why I always, at least in my mind, uh, testimony, eyewitness testimony, is always going to be key, but it's always the hardest to believe. Without hard evidence, at least.
One of the organizations that I've been working with is the formerly known as the Free Research Organization, which Edgar Mitchell started up, and Ray Hernandez is taking the reins of. And right now it's the CCRI, Consciousness and Contact Research Institute. Okay. What they're looking at is they're looking at a qualitative research into experiencers. So it's similar to near-death experiencers, where you get, instead of just looking at, I think when people explain their experience, they feel isolated. But what this does is this looks at it from 5,000 experiencers and then takes the similar characteristics of what happens, like near-death experience. I go through a tunnel. I go through a near-death review, and it's a broader spectrum.
Same thing with, all the people that say they see elves or this elf being when they do DMT.
Right. The machine
elves. Those are similarities that we need to note, because that's coming out of every single story.
So important.
Right? Mm-hmm. So that's an important detail to go further with, because it's so common amongst the stories. Now, keep going. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, I just think that there and that right now is the only research study that has been accepted in scientific journals that are recognized right now. And I think that we're looking at disclosure, but I think that we're not really looking at, like, Gary Nolan. To me, one of the people that would be great to be involved in this field is Dean Radin. Somebody who can come up with projects, that can come up with the data to help make the case for more research being done. Right.
And because I was saying this to someone, I think I was saying it to Holly, that UAP girl. So, I just met another girl, that UFO chick, and now I'm mixing them up.
Yeah, that's my buddy. From
every other day, I'm mixing them up. That UAP chick, and mixing them together. But with UFOs, we've actually come so far that, when we look at these other phenomenon that we don't really necessarily tie into UFOs, like remote viewing, these consciousness-based abilities, we're still in the dark ages when it comes to this stuff. People look at it as hardcore pseudoscience and, untouchable science fiction. Now, what do you think, that there's been any progress, or do you think we're still kind of stuck?
Well, I think people talk about the term woo, right? When you get in and you get involved and you talk about woo. To me, there's different topics that are considered woo, and then more that have been studied more to actually progress in the knowledge of the subject. So when people talk about woo, are we talking about reptilians, or are we talking about telepathy? So I think more of a definition of a lot of what's actually being studied would be helpful in progression going forward with experiences.
What do you think what do you think would have to happen to take this more, legitimize this, legitimize this no, I don't want to say industry. That's the total wrong word, but
No.
this phenomenon.
Yeah. I think that studies or actual universities having recognition of a subject that could be studied for real. So I think one of the things that frustrates me most is I'm not sure if you know Jeffrey Mishlove. Jeffrey Mishlove is
One of
somebody
my
who
favorite people in the world.
Yep, Jeffrey
I don't know.
Mishlove is somebody. Yep, who has a podcast. Who goes back in New Thinking Aloud, which goes to interviews researchers that have been on the subject for years. But I think that really looking at the subject from that perspective can help the field in itself and what he's been doing. And he also was the recent Robert Bigelow had a contest where it was near-death experiencers were sending in their, and he was number one. So he got the reward of 500K
Was
for
it?
his.
Yeah.
Wasn't
Big money.
Bigelow's like whoever can bring me proof of the afterlife?
Yeah, it was an essay contest where it was like they had a panel. Leslie Keane was on the panel. I think Hal Puthoff. Like there was a bunch of like really incredible names on it, and they're all available to download online. There's a lot of people who won money, but Jeffrey Mishlove's essay was ranked number one as the most convincing. Like, present me with evidence of consciousness surviving physical death. I'm
Right.
actually in the middle of reading it because I mean,
Maybe
I love
one of
this
you can
guy's work.
send it to me.
Yes, I'll send it to you. I have
Yeah,
everything.
'cause I would love
and anybody
to.
else in the chat that wants it. I'm glad you brought him up, Astral, because I feel like he brings a lot of credibility to the table for these topics. The way he speaks about it, his knowledge base. Like he had Ray Hernandez on his show, I believe. I think that's how I discovered Mr. Hernandez. So,
how did you spell his last name?
Mishlove?
Yeah, because I thought you said Mitchell, but it's Mishlove.
Yeah,
Mishlove,
it's just like it sounds. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's
So he was the last person to actually get a parapsychology degree in America, and so that was like 60 something, maybe 70.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the recognition, and there might have been a couple, classes that you could have taken that have to do with UFOs, but until you can study consciousness, altered states of consciousness, UFO studies in college for people to have a track to go through.
Well,
I think that's the next step.
I think we should be teaching kids about consciousness in elementary school.
Absolutely.
Right? Getting them, while their brain is still forming and
Never talked about it in school.
And finalizing, becoming its final self. We should be teaching kids to expand and to push the limits of their consciousness and teaching them that, all about all these subjects so that the next generation doesn't suffer the way we did, right? About when it comes to stigmatization, and people have had their lives ruined, lives taken away. I've talked to so many experiencers whose lives changed because of this, and it didn't have to necessarily. If we were more accepting as a society, these people wouldn't be ashamed to tell their stories. So I think that's, again, central as well. But yeah, elementary programs for consciousness.
Things are moving in a good direction, Ty. I was in a store not that long ago, and there were children's books. It was 5 and below, actually, and there were children's books like meditation for kids, and it's like,
Right,
I've never seen that before.
Meditation's
so to me,
a
that's
good
a step
one.
in the right direction.
That is a good.
Meditation's huge. I do it twice a day. That's what I was doing before the show. Like, I can't go a day without it, or I feel like off. Like it grounds you. There's so much radio noise going on in the world now, all this technology, our cell phones and everything. And if we're going to get anywhere with like psi and astral projection, like you really, from my own personal experience, being that I have astral projected a few times, you really need to ground yourself and you have to drown out the noise. Like, you can't expect to astral project after a night of like partying and drinking. It's not going to happen. You have to get back in touch with like nature, essentially. For lack of a better way of saying it.
So one of the well, really, the only study that I was supported for a grant was looking into the age of kids and the psychic ability as they get older. And what it really found was that at the younger age, kids have a more of adaptability to have a psychic phenomenon happen.
Mhm.
And as they get older, they get conditioned into not having it, or the stigma gets thrown into the mix.
Yeah,
It's
you know,
fascinating.
it's funny because I've heard stories about like babies, like pointing, just like young kids, really young kids, like saying that they saw someone or saw something, and none of the adults believe them. And yeah, do you think, like, because then we talk about the aerial school, right? The aerial school where all these
Mm.
children say they saw this craft, and that it gave them, a few of them a warning, psychic, oh god,
Telepathic.
telepathically, gave them a message of dire warning for our planet, right? Like, they didn't just pull that out of fucking thin air, right?
Yeah.
Like, so are kids easier to communicate with because they're so open to it, and then we lose it somewhere, when we get a certain age, and like I said, our brain settles and finally forms its adult form. Could that be something that's going on?
I think when we talk about disclosure, I think we talk about it a lot in terms of ourselves, and where our current situation is. But for me, having I've got a couple kids, 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. I think about them in terms of how are we going to get the attention of the younger generation, because there's so much distraction out there that happens,
Right.
whether shit, it's
TikTok.
Fortnite or
Yeah,
whatever.
TikTok,
TikTok, Fortnite,
Fortnite.
everything.
Instagram likes.
Dude, I was
Yes.
literally just saying that the other day too. Is like, just think about that, because we were talking about religion, and I was like, well, think about it. Think about the world that they lived in. Like, they didn't have all the fucking distractions that we have. They didn't have a computer to go sit down at and look at memes. So, that's unfortunately why I have a hard time with religion, because the, where and when it came from. I do think there's something after death, some sort of survival, but I don't believe the one in what man says. I don't. It just wouldn't make sense to me. We don't even know our own origin story. So, you know, come on, let's get real. But kids and kids often have. There was one case where the girl had like she knew her past life.
Past life.
Do you
Yeah.
do you know about
Past
this
life
one?
regression. And I think that one of the things that are interesting, reincarnation, looking at kids' accounts of previous lives that they have, and then looking into the facts that they talk about.
Because there was that, like I
And
said, there was the girl
yeah,
who had like she knew almost like weirdly like specific things, and
yep,
they figured they looked into it, and all of it was real, and like
yep.
that moment, just finding all that.
It wasn't a girl.
It was a
You're
boy.
talking about Ralph Klarber. So that was
I thought it
on
was a girl. Maybe I was wrong.
There's similar cases, but the one you're thinking about, they okay, so Leslie Kean had that book that I just finished, Surviving Death. They made it into a Netflix series. Ralph Klarber,
Wait, that's a Netflix
well,
series?
he was, yes, you gotta watch it. Like, it's incredible, dude. I'm telling you, like, especially for people who are like me. So I'm like
Damn
actually
it.
really afraid of death. But
I know, I don't wanna die.
that show really gave me a lot of peace, actually,
I
because the
really fucking
evidence is
yeah, I hate talking
hardcore.
about death because I really don't
This
want
will
to.
give you hope. This kid was like he was remembering being a fighter pilot, and now his father was like a hardcore Christian, right? But a reasonable, open-minded guy at the same time. But he was steadfast in his beliefs. He did everything he could to debunk this, and I mean they even figured out where the plane went down. It was the Natoma Bay. I mean,
Mm.
down to details that were only known to personal family members. I mean, it's like, how do you explain that? It's
That's why it's the phenomenon. That's why it's a
it'd be
phenomenon.
one thing if the kid got one thing right, but they had a list of like over 70 details that this kid just knew, and his knowledge of aircraft at such a young age, where he wasn't on the internet.
Right.
I mean, to me, the only explanation is some sort of consciousness non-locality / reincarnation occurring.
Well,
I mean, the
that's the
data
same thing.
backs it up.
Remember, we were like, actually, I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on that, Astral, and the fact, like, what about people saying, The Simpsons, like how many things they've gotten right in these like not predictions, but kind of subtleties. They
Yeah.
they like subtly put something in there. Like people say Matt Groening might be a time traveler. Just all the shit that he's kind of put in the show that's come to fruition. Do you think that's all coincidence and like kind of pop culture garbage?
I think that in terms of creativity and how the information comes to the creative forces that are actually on the cutting edge of this media stuff. I mean, The Simpsons are just another level. It feels like
it's like 190 predictions correct.
Been around for a long time.
Coincidence only goes so far. I can deal with like 3 to 5 coincidence.
Yeah.
Maybe things. But once you get past that, it's like, huh?
It's a lot.
Like there's just
one
so
of the
much.
things.
So much.
All right. So one of the things that I think has my interest throughout the years is lucid dreaming. Lucid dreaming feels like the ability to either discover your subconscious or ask or interact with your dreaming environment actively or even outside your dreaming environment. So it's like the ability to interact with your subconscious in a way.
Lucid dream is something like this. So lucid dreaming is something I've always wanted to do. I've always felt that same way, but it also kind of, freaks me out a little bit. Like
it's challenging though. It's
and
very
it is.
hard.
I've
I've
heard
had
it's
it
very
happen,
challenging.
but I'm never the one that's like initiating it. But
Now on your
it was always
website
great.
though, on your website now, what are you trying to do with your website? It seems like you're trying to teach people these things, right? Like you're compiling this history and data and these presentations, so people can kind of do their digging into the backgrounds of it.
Sure.
Why'd you put that together?
So 15 years ago, after my precognitive dream, I moved to North Carolina and got involved with the Ryan Research Center. I wanted to find a way to have just more of an open platform for people to send in their experiences. I was more interested. A lot of the things that I like to do, even with Twitter, is just have an open platform for people to come in and feel comfortable enough to explain their experience enough so that they're not automatically judged and drawn out.
You're right, right. Made fun of or told they're a liar, because that's like that's what stops people from coming forward with anything. And if we don't have the information, then we don't have the information, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
So
I think there's a stigma that happens with people who maybe try to explain what's happening with people, and there's such a broad spectrum. Even if you look at Jacques Vallée, who is considered the OG of right, like the OG, the deeper
of
he
the
goes,
alternative height,
man.
Yeah, just with an how put off somebody who has been put in years of work into this. The deeper they get, the more questions and options they have. It's not like they narrow in. It's like, oh, this is this. It's like, we've got a lot going on here. There's a broad spectrum that we need to look at.
There's so much science that still needs to be done, and even guys like Jacques Vallée, like you said, that have done done years and years of bringing this to the mainstream. I've only gotten so far, so it's going to be up to our generations to move the ball forward. And I think when and if a UFO disclosure happens, I think honestly, I think in turn a domino effect, it would help these other things happen. Because who knows what we would learn, right? Who knows, if disclosure happens in a way, where aliens come down and literally come out and say hello, and we have to talk with them telepathically, that's going to be all right. There you go, disclosure on that too. Now we know it exists. It really exists. So who knows where this thing ends up going? But there's so much story, but unlike UFOs, there's not as much hard data. Now, how do you grapple with that?
Well, the data, I think, is the toughest part for skeptics. I like to play the opposite role of the skeptical approach. So even with the appearance of UFOs in the technology development that we've had over the years, I think is a very good way to explain a lot of the sightings that we've had. So if you look at our defense, our intelligence community, if they've had 30 or 40 years advancement in intelligence or technology development, I think there's a very logical way. But one of the things that I kind of keep going back to is these alternate states of consciousness, out of body experiences, a little bit deeper approach to it.
And that makes sense. Now, is it your goal to teach people about these things? All of because you have a broad track of things that you're interested in.
I think for me, my focus is more on to me, when I look at getting involved in UFO Twitter, I think it's funny because I fucking love UFO Twitter, but I also hate UFO Twitter.
It's the best, but it's the worst. Yeah,
it's terrible at the same time.
I think that's like everyone's relationship.
It's like it's like the cutting edge. Look, to me, if you want to know what's really going on in the last couple of weeks, you'll go on that platform. Or like the Reddit subreddits, but you have to get
that one's even worse, man. Dude, they're so mean there. It's so bad. I try to post it. I try to post a video and they're like, "Dude, you're fucking trash." I'm like, "Oh my god, oh my god, what did I get myself into here?"
Oh my god. That's so funny.
It gets deep. I think when you are looking for, like, to me, Twitter is a great way to find out what's going on in terms of the news. Whether or not you like what's going on, what's being focused on, it's a good way to catch up on the last couple of weeks on what's being focused on and what's trending coming up. So it's great. I like interacting with it, and I think coming up, to me, I've found that there's spaces where like you have Jay-Z coming in, DJ Khaled's hosting. So to me, there's not anybody too big in the field that can pop in and say, "Hey, this is what I'm working on. This is what I think." Get the discussion going on what I've been working on. Something like
right. That. And I think there are. Do you think? I kind of want to get generalized here. Do you think there's people that we hold up on a pedestal like that? Like these people, like Dr. Greer, like Gary Nolan, Luis Elizondo. Do you think that holding them on this high pedestal, like trying to get these movements pushed forward, can be too much pressure for these people? Because it's such a stigmatized phenomenon that, like, being the head of it, it might sound all cool and like dandy, but often it's not a role that we see people in it for a long time.
I think there's maybe like a responsibility that some people have, but it should be held upon some of the people who are known or the face of this movement that's coming by, of releasing the information. So while myself, I don't like to focus exactly on like people's credentials or like digging deep into like the credibility of people. I like to take the information in the totality of a lot of what I hear and all of the information that I get. But I do respect a lot of the people who are behind the scenes. I think a lot of the people think that like it needs to be out in the forefront about what people are doing. But I think a lot of behind the scenes of whether politically or scientifically, you know, you to mention Nolan or stuff like this, I think that a lot of stuff is being done, but they're just not like boasting about it. But it's being done behind the scenes.
Right. I mean, look at Tim. I just posted it last night. Tim Burchett, the rep.
Yes.
He is just wild.
On
He's
fire.
wild right now.
Yeah.
Just at the way I put it is just attacking his employer. I know we are technically the taxpayers employ them, but his technical employer, the United States government, like he is very open about calling them. He says, what was the quote? I wouldn't trust them if they told me the sun was rising. I was like, damn, this motherfucker means business.
He is not kidding around.
And he's been featured on like Ancient Aliens. Like he's not someone who's afraid to, push the boundaries of what it means to be in in this community. Now, there are people who question loyalties, right? Even with Luis Elizondo. You got guys like what's his name, Stephen Greenstreet, that are so hyper focused. Even John Greenwald to a degree, so hyper focused on like the difference between ATIP and OSAP and the timeline of the two. Do you think that these are just issues that are like it doesn't help us anymore? Like just leave it be.
The clarification, I think a lot of the time in just Twitter spaces, there's a lot of talk of the motivation between a skeptic and a debunker. What's the difference, between a skeptic and a debunker? I think a lot of the time, if a new topic comes up, a new sighting is made, that the quicker somebody is to give a counter argument or give an explanation of, it goes along with just their intention of it and less about trying to get to the truth of it. So like, for example, like the Ben Hansen Christmas lights.
Oh my God, that one was so ridiculed by like Green Street and Mick West. It was so bad.
Yeah.
It was so bad.
It was rough.
Now, because you are getting more into the UFO subject, what are your thoughts, on the community and because I find it to be a really like 90% good community, but there is that 10% that do try to use and maybe lie and try to profit off of the stories and just our willingness to believe. Now, do you think that is happening across the board or?
I think it's really tough to gauge person by person the intentions that they have, and even the moral character that they have. I think there's a campaign to, even through Elizondo all the way down to personalities are unknown to the community that are funny ass names in itself. I think that it too much is made into the personalities and maybe the intentions that they have, and less about the information that they're sharing. So I try to separate myself from that, but I think it creeps in. What's funny is I was reading John Keel, and he relates a lot of the community. Like he's like, one of the quotes he has is sort of like, the community is so consumed with arguing amongst themselves that there's no real research being done into the phenomenon itself.
Well said by Mr. Keel, as always.
Yeah.
Yeah, his go ahead, Ty.
No, you.
Keel had a lot of good insight into the state of affairs, and it's funny because a lot of that has continued on. I'll be scrolling Twitter, And it's like why are we spending our time arguing over whether or not ATIP was called ATIP? Shouldn't we be, focused on
Well, that's what I'm
whether
saying.
the thing they were studying is real? But personally, I think we're past that point
Because
already. Like,
why I
it's
think
out
it's
there.
such a fundamental error is the New York Times has still not still to this day, they have not retracted. Same with Politico and Brian Bender, both reported on it with the same sources. Neither, well, actually, Bender has definitely recanted and spoken up about it, but I don't think it's been in writing necessarily. But they haven't made a difference between the money never went to ATIP for UFO study. It went to OSAP, and OSAP was studying a very not just UFOs, but very much things that go bump in the night, right? Skinwalker Ranch, right? That is not UFOs. Most of it is not. There's a very small, limited part of it. But I think they didn't want to go that way because they were afraid. Because UFOs, unfortunately, are the less of the skepticized options at that point, right? So I think the authors chose to go with ATIP instead of OSAP, or the sources chose to. Like, I think someone neglected this. Someone changed the name on purpose somewhere.
Here's where I think UFO Twitter could be used most productively, and this ties in, Ty, with what you're working on as well with Mario Woods. Is Mario Woods, I think, recently mentioned Richard Doty in an interview. Okay, so Richard Doty was recently in a space on Twitter, and somebody asked him about that interview. And so I think using UFO Twitter as the resources in the network to get to the bottom of things, whether or not we get to what people's opinion are, I think we can use it as a network and a resource, even for sightings locally, to get to the bottom of things.
It's so I think you nailed it right there, man.
Yep.
Because it definitely does help. Mario sent me a handwritten letter from Doty to Mario responding to it. So I know the answer to the question about, or at least I know what he said to Mario personally, not in an interview on something. So I'm not, which is not much. But the goal is to get them in the same room, right? Like, because maybe we could strike some memory that being in this, being together might be like, oh shit, I remember. Because all we need to do is find Michael Johnson. That's really the goal in the Mario Woods case. Is if we can find Michael Johnson, I think this case becomes a whole different thing. Because then not only are we talking, UFOs over nuclear bases, but straight up abduction as well. Like in the military, of people being abducted, that would be taken very seriously.
Without question.
I've often wondered, because of the remote viewing program ending, what would be the continuation of that that our government would have through experiencers. Would it be like something like Chris Bledsoe in contacting non-human intelligence and getting information, or how deep would that get?
Can you do me a favor? Can you tell me a little bit more about the government's involvement in remote viewing and all these things, and at least what you know about it?
Well, I think that what's really interesting is after there's this a CIA document that's been released where our government looks at the Monroe Institute of out of body experiences, the Gateway Project, influential ways for altered states of consciousness, and then the remote viewing program starts the next year. Right? Yeah, so the Stargate program started the next year. Yep, after that document was made. And so it was a 20-something year program in which we looked at from the Russian intelligence, I think looking at psychic experience, spying on locations through, consciousness.
Mhm.
And so, really, after a couple of trials and experiences that I think a lot of the experiences have from Joe McMoneagle, Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ started the program. So they developed the protocols for remote viewing. And I think even nowadays, people have groups to explore remote viewing. And one of the things that I've done is on Twitter to just have a very nonchalant way of people to try remote viewing, of like hiding a picture in an envelope
Mhm.
and trying to draw what's in the envelope, and then comparing it to the actual
What is
target.
actual,
You
right?
posted
Yep.
something like that, I
Yeah,
believe.
I've
Well,
been
that
doing it weekly, so for like
Yeah.
3
Mhm.
months. Yeah.
right, I saw and I saw on the website that, like, you saw you had a list of, like, what you need. Like, it's, like, kinda like taking a course, And I was like, "Oh, this is really cool, I like this." So,
Remote viewing is real.
well, that's why I think it's so interesting is that the CIA did, in fact, like, when I found that out, that was what I think that's the thing that's most blown my mind,
Yeah.
is the fact that, UFOs, I can understand. I can understand life, because I am life, and I can understand it.
You're
However,
observing it.
I've never remote viewed or had any of these things happen. So, like, when I heard that the CIA legitimately studied and didn't not just study it, but came out with some pretty good, what would you call it? Objectives. Came out pretty happy with their goals being met.
Yeah.
That this thing is legitimate. Like, people are really able to do this somehow. It's still mind blowing to me.
Well, even with remote viewing, and the experiencers talk about um, going through a remote viewing exercise and then experiencing non-human intelligence or UFOs, or they give the task of remote viewing the dark side of the moon or Mars, and they give very interesting results of what they get.
Right. And for me, the remote viewing, I guess, I don't know. It's because I've seen it happen, or they at least showed it in some one of the documentaries I watched. They showed how it happened, and they showed the results, and everything was like, I was like, crazy good. Now again, it brings me back to that, like, does everybody have the ability, or is it like 3% of the population, and that 3% will reproduce, and that percentage will start getting larger, and that's how this evolution will happen, right? And could one day, like, could we really be living in a universe where people can move stuff with their mind?
I think we already are.
Like PK. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
One of the ways I think people try to um, exhibit their psychic ability is through PK, whether moving
What is
an
that?
object like psychokinesis.
Okay,
If you
okay, I'm
had,
sorry.
so if you had one of the ways, if you had a paper clip that had a uh, object on, like a aluminum foil on top of it, and then you
Okay,
had a glass structure blocking it, and then with your mind you tried to rotate it. Okay.
okay.
With like Beauty and the Beast
Yeah,
within
yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
Within
you were
it.
trying to so you were trying to rotate it. Um, there have been documentation and studies that people are able to actually move that, PK,
Get the fuck out of
psychokinesis.
here.
So it's moving things with your mind. People talk about this again. Remote
so
viewing to
so like
me, yeah.
11.
Yeah, like 11 from
Exactly.
Stranger
Yep.
Things.
That's
Yes,
dude,
that was
dude.
influenced by MK Ultra and a
Yeah,
lot of
they
other
did a
real
lot of MK
things.
Ultra inspiration, at least scenery wise, graphic, like,
Yes,
scene
absolutely.
wise. But imagine like a legitimate program like that. Wow, jeez, blows my mind.
They're still
Um,
going on in my mind. I feel like once they realized how powerful remote viewing was, that's when they closed the program down.
so now I wonder what he means here. I've held the energy of all the planets, and what struck me the hardest was the absolute cold that Saturn lent to me. it felt legitimately dangerously
My
cold.
friend Zio. Yeah, I
Yeah.
told you he's had some incredible experiences out of body, for lack of a better term, that are you just would not even begin to comprehend them. You'd have
Yeah.
to
So what
listen to
is
it
he? Is
multiple times.
he going to the planets? Like now, as a remote viewer,
Yes.
do you go to the planet itself? Like when you see it in your mind, are you there? I wonder how
Your
that works.
consciousness is there, seemingly, at least from what he has explained to me. You know, we've been best friends for like 15, 20 years. The way
And
I interpreted it is that his consciousness was at these locations, and it allowed him. He felt sensations resonating from these experiences, so it was like a mix of physical and non-physical in a weird way. It was like some weird in between.
Mm. Now, Astral, do you think that LSD and DMT and mushrooms and stuff like that? Do you think there's any use of these things for people that may have a harder time with piercing the veil? Do you think there's some correlation between these psychedelic drugs?
Absolutely. I think less about using it as like a crutch to get there, but I do think there's a method
Well, yeah. I mean, some people
in a
like
substance. Yeah.
some people need a little push, off the
Oh yeah,
cliff,
no doubt. Oh,
right? So
if I was
Coach, all
there,
right.
there are people looking at the study now. I think even Grant Hancock about extending the experiences, the DMT
yeah.
experience, from 10 to 50 minutes or something to
Yes.
be able to explore that.
Explore that dimension because I've been
Yep.
there, and so I know for a fact. I've taken many psychedelics. I just ate. All right, full. I'll give you guys total disclosure right now.
Total disclosure.
I just ate a little
Nice.
bit of mushroom chocolate, just like 30 minutes ago. So, you know, psychedelics and stuff. Listen, they don't bring you to other worlds and stuff, typically. But DMT brings you to a fucking another place.
Yeah,
It
it
is
does.
it is so hardcore
Yeah.
that I was frightened the first time.
It was overwhelming.
Yeah, it was definitely overwhelming when I came out back here. I was like, like,
It's like getting shot out of the Matrix.
yeah. So,
It's
have you ever
Well,
tried it?
one of my things I think to really look at in coming up is people talk about disclosure, but I think one of the things to look at is any of these organizations that are trying to have contact with non-human intelligence. So they talk about like this psionic program that's trying to extend DMT, the Monroe Institute that's looking for ways to have non-human intelligence experiences, CE5 or ways, but even Bob Bigelow of looking for channelers and mediumship to contact the other side. I think really people are looking to tap into that if there's any way to get information through time about what's going on in our future, just through humanity or people themselves.
I
Right.
think it's
And
all the same thing too. Like they're all looking for essentially the same thing, but they may not even realize it using different methods. It's like who's the first one to get to the moon? This is like the next great frontier, essentially.
Mm.
And I know there's a lot of people out there that think this is just nonsense and you're just hallucinating. But to bring Jeffrey Mishlove back up, he was talking with a gentleman. I can't remember his name right now, but there was some sort of study done, and they were beginning to like map like
the DMT world.
the geography of like the other side. Like there were people
Mm.
that were like going under with like sensory deprivation tanks and things of that sort. And like three people would go in and they would all be brought into like separate rooms, and they were able to describe like locations that they experienced without
Mm.
having spoken to one another, like
Right.
as if they all went to a physical place. And I
Mm.
found that absolutely startling, that like perhaps this is some actual locale that you're not physically visiting, but you're like metaphysically visiting. So I think this is like they're like psychonauts, essentially, is what
Right.
they're called.
And awake while sleeping brings up a fun point. Now, if we sleep 50% of the time and experience phenomena in our dreams, such as a prophecy, is that a form of remote viewing? I mean, Astral, what would be your input on that? I think because I don't.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways. To me, a lot of it, when you're talking about dream interpretation, the more realistic the dream, to me, based off experience, the more you should pay attention to it. So if you're like
Oh
flying
no.
next to a plane, or if you have like a car accident where the situation could actually take place, I think you should pay attention more to those dreams. I do think
Can
remote
I
viewing. Yeah, go ahead.
can I tell you about one of my dreams real quick?
Absolutely.
If that's true, this dream I had, it was about 5 months ago, and I still remember it to like a drop. And I say that for a reason. I was in a big glass building, and you could see 360 panorama, and it was raining upwards, not downwards. Up, like when I went to the glass, I started noticing the rain was going up, not down, and then lightning seemingly struck the building itself, and I could feel myself being moved through time, like something like the Flash. I don't know if you know the character the Flash. Like
Yeah.
it felt like I was going through the Speed Force, and I was being stretched through time. And I woke up and it was raining, and I freaked out, man. I freaked out, and that was I woke. That felt. I could remember smells, and I never smelled anything in a dream before. I can remember smelling static as the electricity was coursing through. Like it was the most real dream I've ever had, and it freaked me the fuck out. So I wonder
Like
what that meant.
carry over, just even
Am I
emotion
gonna go
from the
time
dream.
traveling?
Yeah. I think, you know what? To me, some precognitive dreams or lucid dreaming, to me, lucid dreaming is like a superpower almost. But I think like um, uh, a lot of remote lucid dreamers talk about being able to realize in your dream and then having a precog or a notion of the question that you want to ask or a healing that you want to get. So people talk about healing in a lucid dream of like, oh, I want to
Right,
heal my foot. And then they become cognizant in their dream. And then they say, okay, I want to heal my foot. And then they have like this light or hands or third party help them. And they're woken up and it's healed. And so people
right,
talk about these like incredible experiences, but it's through dreams and recognizing a consciousness in your dream almost and then doing something.
right. And dreams have always fascinated me.
Me too.
Truly fascinated me. Like why would we have such an ability to do something? Like why is that? Why isn't it just lights out for 6 hours?
Right?
Why
Why indeed?
why does our consciousness continue the way that it does? And do you give any validity to the fact that now one of my favorite theories or maybe narratives is that um, consciousness acts more of like a signal, and we are a radio. So you can bust and break up the radio, but the
Mm.
signal's still there. So our consciousness continues after our body, after the body, and it was before the body. So what do you take of that, and this one consciousness idea, or that there's only one consciousness in the world, in the
Yeah,
universe?
I think, and when and I mean I love the consciousness, dude, and even the simulation hypothesis.
That one
When you
freaks me
look
out
at
a little bit.
yeah.
'Cause
Even that's the crazy thing about UFOs is you go to that point of even exploring that.
right, right.
I think consciousness, though,
Huh.
you look at it to me from three perspectives: your individual consciousness of like your consciousness within your body, of that existing in itself. There's a connected consciousness of a inner web of consciousness that I think there might be of big events that happen throughout the world that we measure, and that's underlined in itself, and then the consciousness that some people describe of being the controller of the universe itself, of like the consciousness that would be behind like the simulation or running the simulation, or something that you'd be able to interact with, to learn more about the universe. But that's kind of like the three ways that I look at interacting with consciousness.
Because I think there's got to be something, like there's got to be some reason that we're here, or there's got to be some connection, like, and I know people default to religion in this that, because if you don't have some sort of spiritualness or some sort of hope, I suppose there is you're missing a piece of something. Like you feel like you're missing a piece of something. So I think coming into this community and finding out about all these different theories and narratives and all these different things, it's given me a lot of hope for the fact that we are here for a reason, and our legacies uh our legacies are to do with every single, our legacy is our parents' legacy, is our grandparents' legacy. We need to keep this planet intact, not blown up. We need to move our species forward in a peaceful way. Like that's what we're entitled to do, and we're going to grow along the way, and it's up to us to keep the ball moving.
I think it's important to a lot of what I think about is the younger researchers. A lot of what I've heard about and focus on is about people who, look, they've been focused on for a lot of the time, but it's going to be time for new people to step it up and to get the people the information that's going out there, or even new research that's going to be done. So, dude, like, just with this and you guys in the conversation of what you guys are doing, I think there's an importance to getting the information to a younger demographic, and that's one of the focuses that I like to kind of focus on too.
Yeah, and making people aware, not not just the UFO people, but the general public aware of the consciousness, and what we have the potential for. Is I feel like I used to think of the world as like pretty black and white, like what you see is what you get, but I don't think that's the case anymore. I think there's a lot of gray, a lot of gray, and it's up to us to find out what that is, or find out more about what we're seeing in the skies, what we're seeing with other people's abilities, consciousness based abilities. It's up to us to keep, like I said, keep the ball moving forward on this, not drop it, because if we do, the consequences might be devastating. I think one thing Thomas even brought up the other day is like nuclear bombs affecting different dimensions, right? Like, what if we're doing more damage somewhere else?
Yeah,
what are your thoughts about the multidimensional theory, that it's not just this?
Yeah, I think even Dorothy Azad, who to me is one of the most credible experiencers, she talks about
I'm sorry, what was the name?
nuclear effects. Dorothy Azad, so Izatt, I think is it? Dorothy Azad. So to me, she was somebody who regularly had sightings, and if she was an experiencer nowadays, would have a lot better technology to be able to document this stuff.
Right.
But she talks about just being able to. Oh, I'm sorry. What were we talking about again?
So now I kind of even forgot. I kind of even forgot now.
Multiverse.
The multiverse. The fact that we may be doing damage, or what if UFOs are here
nuclear,
because
yep. Yeah, so she talks about the ramifications of us testing nuclear weapons, in that it's not just a risk to ourselves, but that the ramifications are in these other dimensions. And the reason that these UFOs are here is not because they're concerned about us, because they're concerned about their own dimensions getting infiltrated from these nuclear ramifications that happen. And so whether or not they're trying to mentally affect us to not do it, or to shut us down to where we're shooting them in the air and then some kind of mechanical effects happen, I think there is a concern in general, even with non-human intelligence experiencers, when they talk about people like deep experiences through dreams of like, why are you here? Why are you contacting us? There's a concern underlined about us using nuclear weapons.
Yeah, and the nuclear aspect, I personally, it's one of my favorite things to talk about because I think the evidence definitely points to three things: water, nuclear activity. Oh shit, I had a third one. God damn. We'll keep going on. I'll remember it in 2 seconds. But we'll start with water and nuclear. So nuclear, I mean, like even Mario Woods, right? Like take his story for example, or the Rendlesham Forest incident, or Roswell. Like there's far too many. Again, we go into that 3 to 5 coincidence thing. There's far too many instances. Right here at home as well, where nuclear bases, either got turned on and ready to launch basically seconds from World War III, and then shut down. That happened at 2 different Air Force bases in the United States, one in Russia that we know of. So these things are happening in our airspace, and we're not hearing about it. Now, I think this is that's a criminal act from the United States government to not be sharing that kind of information. But it all goes back to this same thing, right? Why are they here? And I think there's a clear indicator that the nuclear situation is one of them. Tom, what do you?
So I wanted to actually bring this in too. You mentioned water. Just as like a little side note, there was a recent episode of Unexplained Mysteries on Netflix that presented an extremely credible case. Like, I mean, this is one of the best I've ever seen, and I had never heard of it. It was off of Lake Michigan. It was March 8th of
Yes.
1994, and there was like a couple. Well, like a lot of people saw it, but there was specifically a couple that was actually like out camping
They were
off
camping
of
on the
Lake
beach.
Michigan, and they saw a craft hovering over the water, and they saw like this like plume of water that was rising up to the craft. I've heard a theory about what that may be, and that these craft have the ability to convert the water into like pure hydrogen as like an energy source.
Yeah, kind of the Stanley Myers.
Right. And it's now as far as the nuclear aspect of this is concerned, um there's enough evidence out there, and some of which has been introduced into the congressional record at this point, that
should have been there always, by the way.
Right. Well, something has the ability to pretty much shut our nuclear forces off at will. And I think it sends a clear message that they haven't picked those missiles up out of the silos and thrown them at us. All they did was shut it off. Like, I think it's kind of obvious what that means. Like, and I know that we've been testing and testing and testing, but they kind of it's kind of just like a nudge. They're like, look, we're not going to do it for you, but we will at least advise you that this is bad. It's like someone who keeps making the same mistake. It's like, well, I can't go out there and fix it for you, but I'll tell you what you should do. That's how I take it. I feel like they're just simply telling us like, hey, this is doing a lot of damage to the environment. And like I've been bringing up because of, reading Jacques Vallée, and I read Trinity and all that, we have no idea what we're affecting elsewhere in reality with splitting the atom. We just don't. We only have our perspective on our third dimensional reality. We could have, this is a scary thought and that I brought up, but we detonated the atomic bomb, we could be killing trillions of other life forms in some other reality. and like we are the malevolent gods to them, that the unseen hand that wipes out their planet every so many years. Like, we have no idea. We don't know if maybe some of our weather phenomena is actually a result of something that somebody else is doing somewhere. Like, there's so many different factors at play in the biological world, the physical world, that it's like, this is what, like, I believe, like, the butterfly effect And there's a recent study that actually says the butterfly effect is absolutely true. That like just a single flap from a little butterfly can set off a chain reaction that turns into a hurricane on the other side of the world. Like there's just that many different variables that are at play in the world. Think of how many particles and cells that make up your body, just everything. So you're taking an atom, the amount of energy being generated right there in that small moment, that fraction of a second, is extraordinary. And I feel like a clear message has been sent to us that we're not
We need to
using it
drop these
correctly.
into the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, I don't.
Not really, but
I will say though that there is the fear that perhaps they're telling us this because they want us to disarm, because it's the one thing they know we can use against them. I don't personally believe that one, but it is
because if
it's
they
something
could
that has to
shut
be
them off,
considered.
if they could shut them off, turn them on, I would.
Why would it matter, right?
Why would it matter? Yeah, if they could just shut
That's
them
where
down,
I'm at. It's been
right?
brought up on the other side though, like, well, maybe they want us to get rid of them because that's how they disarm us, and I'm like, no, they would just do it.
Yeah, because you know, well, even if a UFO isn't impervious to nuclear activity, I think if we're shooting nukes at UFOs, the world's ending anyway, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
We've crossed the line at that point, and it's over. It's sadly, end of story. So I'd hate to see it come to that, and that's what I think we need to
It
stop.
would have happened already.
Yeah. So, I mean, is people have talked to me, about human initiated contact, saying that, we're contacting devils. You're everyone thinks that, you're summoning demons, and it's like, no, but, why do people inherently think that these things are malevolent? Astral, if you could weigh in on that. Why do people inherently think it's an evil entity here to destroy us?
I think people have a lot of just information on the possibilities and opinions on what it could be. When you talk about heist in CE5, I think one of the keys is to hear from people who are actually going out and testing it. And I think people's notions on it are that some of these protocols, which exactly what they are, just in terms of like remote viewing, if you were going to try and remote view something, there's different ways to do it. There's different ways to go out and make contact. I think what hasn't been done, and one of the things that I'm working on personally, is a way to actually test it, to actually test these protocols. So when people talk about using tones, using music, crop circles, recorded, different ways, that they're not just taking that verbatim and following along and saying, oh, if I do this, I'll have this experience with that expectation. And I think what also turns people off is the monetary aspect of it, of whether it's you get a retreat, or you buy a CD, or this exchange for money for this information that you can do this type of experience. I think what needs to be brought to the table is a scientific way to look at it, just from a third point of view, to not say this is what happens when you do it, but more of like, these are the type of experiences that people have. Because even if you look at the free research study with people's experiences with non-human intelligence, there have been 25% of people that have had a negative type of experience, and you can't like discard that. You have to recognize that, either through abductions or dreams,
or some other form,
or some other means. You have to you have to look at that and take that into the totality and not discard that. So I think there's an importance to the negative aspect of it, but not an expectation that that's going to happen. I think you need to really pay attention to the people that are actually going out and really testing this, and not to say this is what you have to do to have this experience.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're going to get abducted, you're most likely going to live on a farm. So anyone who lives on a farm, maybe think twice. I'm just kidding.
No, I'm out in the country. So
yeah, anyone who lives on a farm, I automatically assume is going to get abducted. I'm not
man.
in it. I'm in the heart of a city. I'm not getting abducted anytime soon. But I've invited them to come. They just haven't showed up yet.
Me too.
No, I'm just kidding. But you know, that's what I say though. Astral is that we do need to peer review these things like CE5 because some of the videos and stories that come out of there are insane and you know, if we could get more of the population to be peacefully initiating contact with non-human intelligence, that is only going to benefit us in the long run. Again, keyword peacefully, right? Without, you know, without intention, without seeking, you know, information and you know, some way to be rich and famous. Like we can't go in with that mindset. We have to go in with that pure mindset of you know, just wanting those answers for our inside. The those things that we inherently crave, like what happens after death? Are we alone in the universe? Those kind of fundamental questions that make up, you know, consciousness for my aspect.
even using those for like the Galileo project.
Right.
I know there's been discussion of you bring CE5 or people who they think they could conjure up the UFOs more frequently. I mean, bring them out. Let's test them. You know,
Right.
something like that.
And Greer was asked about that on Theories of Everything, and he kind of just you know, walked over it. But maybe, you know, maybe a heist would be more you know, a better target for scientific research into it. I don't know if Greer would open up because I think he's afraid to fail. I really do. I think he's really afraid to have it be quote unquote exposed. I don't want to say he's a fraud because trust me, I want to believe him. I really do. It's I don't want to go too much into it, but you understand.
Yeah.
I just don't think he wants to. You know, we saw how he acted when Gary Nolan came out on that the skeleton thing that they had for the movie that they did. When the answer wasn't what Greer wanted, he kind of went into like a defensive mode and called it junk science and you know, all that stuff. And it was like, all right, can't just take the L. It's okay.
Yeah, to call
you know?
Gary Nolan junk science is
like say
asinine.
So I mean, I like.
Well, I think just like in terms of the community, Keel. I mean, reading Keel recently put it best. Of I think it was like 40 years ago. He said there's so much infighting in the community that there's not enough people actually researching the topic itself.
Right.
Yeah,
because right on.
Empires will always crumble from within, right? You know,
exactly.
It's the inevitability of it, and I think. Do you think we're on the right track right now as a civilization to you know, to be moving towards something, achieving something higher?
I think one of the concerns that I have going forward, having kids of my own, is just the information not being able to. It's just so saturated with bullshit out there.
Yeah.
That the information is not going to get to people. It's not going to be able to be studied. Like Jeffrey Mishov was the last person to study parapsychology, and if there was a way for us, I think a lot of the time we focus on politicians and that, but if we can be able to get this as a field of study, realistically, in universities, like Duke University did with parapsychology, of looking at it realistically, I think we can get younger people involved earlier on instead of later on, and really bring even if it's pilots that are Ryan Graves has a new podcast, and I think some people are jumping into this podcast, but I think the more credibility we can have to professionals, whether it's pilots, scientists coming forward, it will be more beneficial to the field.
I agree completely. Super, because you know, talking to Mario, I've talked to Mario probably every day since he called me, and hearing his story the way I've heard it now, and all the detail of it, and it's like we are allowing these people to basically guard, protect, and if needed, use weapons and basically world-ending weapons. The people that guard and protect these things are saying this, sounding the alarm, saying, "Hey, something's going on." Not it doesn't happen all the time, but it's happening enough where like we should probably be looking into it as as a civilization, not just as the United States, but as a human civilization. Like something's tampering with nuclear bases and the people that work on them and in them. So, what is the correlation between the two? I think we owe it to ourselves and to society to figure that out.
Did you
Because
guys happen
either
to hear? I didn't mean to cut you off, Ty. Because you're talking about things being looked at from like the global perspective. I just heard that the I believe it was over in, I think, the UN. I'm trying to think. UFO Jesus, post disclosure world. He posted a new video. They're creating like a new council of some kind. I only got a brief hearing on it, that it's a global initiated conglomerate to talk about the subject of non-human intelligence, gathering of all countries. Like there was a vote like this week, and it passed. Like there's now
yeah,
going to be like a committee for this, that it is not representative of just one country.
mm,
Like, why would they do, if this is all bullshit, right? If it's like we're just all crazy, why on earth would that happen? Why did the UAP report take so long? Why did they make new laws to protect witnesses with legacy programs? Like, you got to ask yourself, like, this is all happening all at the same
okay,
time, and then
David
guys like
Childress.
Christopher Sharp, he's just like, yeah, you have to ask yourself.
Yeah. Okay, fucking David Childress down
Christopher
there.
Sharp said that like behind the scenes, there's like a sense of urgency to get this information out.
And this should be.
Something's going on. No, but I think it's being driven by something.
Right. Actually,
I don't know what that is, but there's a driving force behind it.
We don't have too much longer, but John Ramirez, just came out. I'm sure Astral, you know who that is by now, if you're into the UFO subject. John Ramirez talked about something in 2027 that he's been hearing chatter about, and has heard a little bit more on, but can't say yet. Right, the classic bait and switch move. But do you think that maybe disclosure is being driven by something that maybe either we know is going to happen or we're preparing for to happen?
Man, disclosure is such a hard topic. I think that
Because
a lot of the disclosure is personally driven. So whether we're talking about the information revealed enough to people to accept what's going on, or to have recognition on the topic, for me, disclosure is more of like a broader spectrum of getting people interested in it, and less about like UFO Twitter. Because I think UFO Twitter, when we're talking about it, or people that are deep in the rabbit hole, we have a lot of expectation with disclosure of like finding out what's behind the UFOs. But realistically, what we're at right now is just classifying the unidentified objects
right,
in a very broad way.
right,
But
being able to
yeah,
identify at least.
sure. And I think going forward, when people talk about disclosure, I think what's holding it back the most is a acknowledgement that we've known about this and that we haven't revealed the information, or that we've currently uh, tried to hide it. And I think the like shame in that, almost, of like we've been hiding it or actively been trying to disinform
Suppress
people
it.
of that.
Yep.
Yeah, less of like, okay, we know that, like, what I think is interesting and what I've heard from spaces is that the first acknowledgement or the first pillar to fall is going to be Roswell. So Roswell is going to be the first one that's acknowledgement of, and sort of the first topic that's going to be revealed.
If that, by the way, if Roswell, that story comes out the real way, that's it. That the levee breaks right there. That's to me, that's where the levee breaks.
All you
Because
need.
Roswell has literally everything.
Yes.
Now finding out what was actually true about that story would be so refreshing, because of Hollywood has fluffed up Roswell so hard at this point that it really is. I bet hard for some people to even. People really think it was not a disc that crashed. People often forget this because documentaries and other things, graphics have made it to be a disc because it's easy to create in CGI.
It was more like a wing.
Yeah, it was like a boot heel wing.
Yeah, it was shaped.
It was
not
very similar to Kenneth Arnold's sighting.
Yes, if not the exact same craft that he saw.
Right. So, even minute details like that, finding out about that. Oh my God. If you're hearing that pillar will fall first, I am so fucking game.
Because
Roswell,
wait.
Roswell is another level. I always thought, from my standpoint, so at least disclosure wise, the first pillar that would fall would be the James Webb Space Telescope finding something spectacular. Then, one of these projects like Galileo project will find a UFO, or they'll recover something out of this world, and they'll kind of package disclosure up in a neat little box for us to consume. That way they don't have to lend credibility to anything that's happened before, but they can start from now and move forward with us, because we have to look at this logically. Like, even when I talk to Stephen Bassett, right, of Paradigm Research Group, we're going to have to meet the government in the middle somewhere. Where we can't prosecute them for the cover up of Roswell if we want to know about the fucking cover up. Because if we do it with an anger and in a persecutive way, they're going to be defensive, and they're going to be like, no, we're not going to tell you anything, because no one wants to do that. No one wants to be called a criminal. So we're gonna have to meet the government halfway on this, and that's gonna be a hard pill for people to swallow.
One of the things just to speak on it really quick, a lot of the discussion on UFO Twitter Spaces is what would be revealed first, like what beings would be revealed first. And my argument would
That's
be
an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean the best scenario to me would be dead grays, so that they wouldn't have to explain the the religious ramifications, or if you talk about reptilians or any kind of influence
Now, why
society, that there would be.
Why would a dead one be any different than a live one for that aspect?
I think it would change the perspective a little bit of that we have evidence of other life, but they're not influencing us or have an effect on us currently.
Okay.
So it would be like, oh, they were exploring us, they've crashed. I mean, that's just my perspective, but I think that's a great conversation to have to get good people's thoughts of.
That's a fucking great question.
Think about it. They could even frame it like, oh, they came here one time and they explored. They're from wherever. It was one trip. They crashed. They died. Haven't heard from them since. They may try to feed it to us like that.
Yeah. So that's a dangerous line to toe. Because evidence would suggest otherwise.
Yes.
Hardcore. But I think the game has to stop, right? I think the game of suppression, that specifically in the UFO topic, needs to stop, because this does not just affect one person. This isn't just about power for one country. This isn't just about one half of the world either. This is about every single human on Earth, right? This is about us, because to an alien civilization or to an ultra-dimensional, whatever it is, we are one. Our story is one story. And we need to figure that the fuck out very soon, because all the fighting that we do within each other is so pointless. And that's why one of my favorite speeches is Reagan's, about his, dire warning of a alien threat. That was my favorite.
Coming together. Yeah.
Yeah, coming together. I mean, before we let you go, man, I'm not going to keep you too much longer. Where do you see us in let's say 5 years? Let's put it at the 2027 mark.
I think that acknowledgement of extraterrestrial civilization we're looking at, to the extent I don't know, it'd be interesting. One of the things, like I talk about, is that I focus on is the scientific development of it. I think for if you're looking from a skeptical point of view, and I like to jump over to the skeptical side of it. I think the scientific side of it, of where it is, and even with scientific journals and projects that produce data, one of the people that I focus on too is Bob Bigelow, in that he's transitioned from a aerospace company to send rockets into space to look at it, to owning
lunar
Skinwalker
habitat.
Ranch, to having a place that's supposed to be a hotspot. Now he's actually paying people for their experiences into these contact with non-human intelligence or the other side. And so I think that's where it's transitioning to, is this type of psychic experience, non-human intelligence side. So I'm interested to see in the next couple of years what transitioning it into.
I think, well, yeah, I think that'd be, I think what you said is pretty spot on, at least in what I think as well. Again, what we need to do first is acknowledge that, just like an addict, we need to admit that there's a problem, right? Or admit not necessarily a problem, but we have to admit that this is happening, and we can no longer afford to keep our heads buried in the sand, because it's going to be either done to us, or we can buck up, because religiously, I think is going to be the hardest aspect. Converting those people that are true, 100%, faith based. Those are the hardest people that we're going to have to kind of that will tackle this, and those people have the hardest time with it. But I think it only expands the capability of God if there is more life. Like, I only think it helps everything. In my opinion, I suppose I'm pretty biased though.
I want to shout out, if I could, a couple of organizations that I've been working with
Hell yeah.
a little bit behind the scenes. One is CCRI, who is formerly the Free Research Association, which looks at experiencers. So agreaterreality.com is the website for the organization. And so they have a lot of great just researchers and scientists that are involved in the organization to look at the experiencer point of view. Another one is UAP Med. So UAPmed.org is the organization. And that is a organization that helps to educate medical professionals that are dealing with people who might have experiences, whether it's sightings or psychic phenomenon, mental issues, medical issues with the phenomenon itself, to educate professionals, that sort. I think that's important as well.
Fantastic.
So important, and that's awesome that you're working with groups like that, man. It really is. And thank you, thank you for all that work that you're putting in, towards these subjects, because we need more people like you, and more people like us. Not to be selfish or anything, but we need more people willing to have the conversation and willing to do the actual scientific study of this, because that's what's going to drive us forward, and at a faster rate than we've ever seen. Because I feel like once the door is open, there's no telling where we go and what we'll be able to do, and what seems like magic today will be possible tomorrow. And it sucks. I don't want to end out on this, but there is the group UAP X that I talked to Tom about, and that I did want to discuss it. You don't, Astral, if you don't want to stay for it, you don't have to. But it's a quick thing. UAPX is definitely in some hot water right now. I don't know if you know about the situation, but
Sure.
UAPX is first off they started charging for interviews, which is, I mean, it is what it is. That was like the first thing that kind of threw a red flag up to me. Was not just like, 300-400 bucks, like 6,000 to get them on like a radio show. So it's just it was ridiculous. But then the story goes even further with a company that they partnered with, Neutronics, I believe is the name, and the CEO of that company is on the, I don't know how to say this without getting demonetized.
A
He's on
chomo.
the sex offender list. Put it that way.
Yeah, you
He's
can say it that
high.
way.
Yeah, like he's on that list. And they're in some they've cut ties with them now and made the smart decision. But the it went on for a little while where, they were being directly tied to them, and talking about how they want to give criminal reform and all this thing. It's like, yeah, that's all good and well, but people that do that specific crime, no. Like, there are 2 crimes that if you are in jail for, you're blacklisted, and that is arson and the other thing, right? When you go down that avenue. So even the hardest criminals hate those people. Like, that's how bad it is. So there's definitely something said to be for criminal reform. I believe in that, right? The prison system should be a correctional system, not a time served kind of thing. So I do believe in that reform, but there's definitely a line in that needs to be drawn, and I think the line was crossed. And I think, unfortunately, UAPX is not going to be taken too seriously anymore, and that sucks because they did just land a huge government contract, which to study UFOs. They wanted to use UAPX to gather information, and now that this happened, I don't know where it lies anymore. So just one more thing we didn't need in this community was this, and it sucks.
Very unfortunate.
I think learning about it, and Tom, I'd like to hear your thoughts because I've also looked at you kind of coming into the situation a little bit later on and learning about it. But for me, a lot of the UAPX skepticism for me came with just the data collection and the mentality of the project itself. I mean, to learn about all that was just of course disappointing as as a father of kids myself.
Right.
But I think it just goes to show even with UAP Med, of the organizations that we work with, that you have to be careful to who you associate with, and you have to be careful of who you end up publicly associating yourself with, even with somebody like Enigma, who has just got a partnership with Arrow. There's already questions to how they've been funded, or I think whenever you get involved in this field, you're gonna have people targeting you for a specific reason. The more that you can be transparent in what you're doing, the better that you're gonna be off.
Exactly.
I completely agree with that sentiment. I was following UAPX, and it's funny because like just earlier this week they invited me into their Discord, and I just I started hearing rumblings that their equipment wasn't all that great. Like Ty said, they're like charging exorbitant amounts of money for appearances. Like myself, being that me and Ty are both content creators. I have my YouTube channel. He has his. Like I of course want to eat, but I would not be personally comfortable charging someone to have me on their show. Like you know what? I that just doesn't feel right to me. But there was also, it seemed like to me that there was a little bit of like a tug of war going on before UAPX actually cut ties with this guy. So I don't. Some people took that as an attempt to kind of be like, well, that was in the past, and I'm sorry, but if you commit that kind of crime you're done.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is
done.
actually, this is even Kevin Day, who's a good friend of mine,
Yeah.
him and his attorney both found what and I can't elaborate on what the reason is, but Kevin saw something he didn't like,
Mhm.
and him and the lawyer, UAPX's lawyer, and Kevin Day's specific lawyer, both left UAPX shortly after Terror in the Sky was made. It
I
seems
didn't know
something,
that.
yeah, something happened after Terror in the Sky where the lawyer and Kevin both saw something that they didn't like, and they left the organization. And Gary was Gary was the creator of it in the first place. But him and Kevin were really went into this thing together. So
Yeah.
to see one of those people leave is, that should have sent up the red flag right there.
Yeah, that's a problem. I mean, I don't think I mean, does UAPX deserve to be completely buried? I wouldn't say so. Yeah, I don't have enough information to make that kind of judgment against their entire organization. Um, I only know so much about them. If they got a government contract, perhaps maybe there's gonna be some personnel changes where they can actually get back to focusing on the work at hand, and maybe good things will happen moving forward. But as a result of this, I'm more inclined to pay attention to like the Galileo project and things like that, Project Titan.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I think
for people
Galileo.
like us, I feel like this needs to be kind of a lesson learned, like Astral's kind of saying, as you move through the space, like as with I don't know how to say this without sounding kind of like narcissistic, but as our popularity grows, like as we gain more subscribers and we have new guests and things, because that happens. But I mean that humbly, of course. We have to be careful ourselves with who we speak with and who we have on the show. We have to do our due diligence and make sure that we don't, immediately like, sign anything or, we have to protect ourselves too, because you never know when it's going to be somebody like that. And it's unfortunate and it's disgusting. I,
Yeah,
I was I was
I'll tell you
ashamed to see that.
I'll tell you a quick story before we wrap up here. Um, One of the people I wanted to get on. Now, one of the first documentaries I watched when I came back, like when I got real hard into the UFO, when it went from like something I was always interested in to the main thing. Uh, I watched a movie from Dockside Media called Conscious Contact, and it was they kind of built the story around this conference or this press conference that this lady Anjali did in Washington. Now Anjali legitimately was, like I forget what her position was in government, like something to do with defense too. So she like has fucking some credentials you'd be proud of. Like damn. But she's telling this story of contacting beings inside of a mountain and all this crazy shit. Tell it how they were, you know, she was telling these details that seem so specific, like what they were wearing, how their skin glistened, and it was found. I don't want to. I'm not going to explain her whole sighting thing, but she said that she was in contact with these beings and that she was going to lead a team, like a legitimate team of scientists and researchers, into the mountain to meet these beings. And obviously, this never happened. It was found to be more fraudulent than it sounds, and it sounds pretty fraudulent already. But it disappointed me, and I almost had her on the show, this close. And, you know, fucking,
Mhm.
God, I would have shot myself in the foot, like, so bad, had I done it. And yeah, but she ended up messaging me later and being like, I was super disappointed to find out that you no longer believe in what I say. And I was like, it's not on me to believe it, but it's on me to make sure I don't, you know, I'm not represented by what you're saying. Because like at that point I wanted to at least have a debate about the validity. I asked her, I said, well, this conversation, if you still want to have this conversation, now it's not about the sighting, or it's not like let's talk further into your sighting. It's did this actually happen? And I didn't want to have that conversation, because that's not one that's fun to have. like me just grilling you the whole time, trying to poke holes in your story. That's not what I want to do. So I just said, no, let's not do this. And, lesson learned, but
Wise move.
wise move. What do you think about that whole Anjali situation? You remember her? Because she was big for like 20 minutes.
I discovered it on Reddit, and the one question I have to ask is like, if that lady is making this entire thing up with her credentials and everything, and she knows that's gonna
Not
blow
her
up in her
credentials.
face,
Her
like,
credentials are legit.
right? No, that's what I'm saying. Is that her credentials? It's like you carry those with you, like as a badge of honor. Why would you put yourself in that type of situation when you know it's bullshit and it's gonna blow up in your face? That's why it makes
Eventually,
me
yeah.
wonder, like, is it possible that she was telling the truth and then it just like backfired? Like, like I don't
No,
know.
that's a huge fucking deal.
It has
'Cause
to be considered in the
it has
least.
to be.
I don't personally believe her, like but
Because you
what
have to
if?
ask to sound like David Childress again, you have to ask yourself again, why would a person of that caliber put themselves center stage knowing damn well this is a ticking time bomb and that
Yes,
you're
like
only
why?
so oh god, man.
I feel like
Imagine
the only explanation for that is that there is some sort of there's something
mental.
going wrong internally with that person. It's like a meltdown, like it's almost it's self-induced destruction. Maybe she just didn't care.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the woman. I don't want to like, make any assumptions about her. She might be, a beautiful person. I have no idea.
Yeah, True
But if these
Seekers had
things
her
if these
on.
things did actually happen to her, then I hope somewhere down the line that there is some kind of redemption, because I feel that way for all experiencers that really believe their own stories and are really telling their truth as they know it. I always hope that if something goes wrong in that they are redeemed
Yeah.
later on down the line, because I can't imagine. It's like the boy who cried wolf,
Well, that brings into question Bob Lazar. Now, Astral, how have you thought of Bob Lazar's story? Because it's one of I think it's the most contested story there is out there. Is at least in my opinion, it's the most controversial. Is at least in terms of where people stand on it. Because you either believe them or you don't. There's no in between for at least for what I see. So
Yeah. I don't know. I have a couple connections to some people who are avid Lazar believers. Um, One of the organizations I'm looking forward to getting involved in is Danny Sheehan's new organization, the
oh yeah, yeah,
UFOC3.
yep.
And I think just getting involved in some of these
He's
organizations, you
the
kind of get a
lawyer,
deeper
right?
level. Yeah.
Yeah, Elizondo and Greer's lawyer.
He's the lawyer,
Yeah.
right? He's been
He's
on
he's a constitutional lawyer. He's probably the best there is, actually.
right.
Yeah, I
And
think just to find out what the organization is about, of getting awareness out there on a deeper level, either politically or in the depths of this disclosure whistleblowers.
right. And yeah, we definitely need people to, and that's what Greer did a video on the other night was, calling all these whistleblowers forward is like, and yeah, I agree with him there. Again, I don't like to call them whistleblowers because what they're doing is not actually blowing the whistle on anything.
Right.
They're, it's radically different. But that's like the closest word people can think of. So they keep saying it. So, but that is not the, so I'm trying to work it out of the vocabulary, but we do need these people to come forward. Like imagine Bob Lazar testifying in a closed door setting. Like, that alone speaks volumes. That he'd put his story up to congressional, up that ladder because they're the ones that are going to be able to find out. Did he work there? Did he go to school here? And the we won't be in the room, but hopefully our representatives will be, right? So that's what we want is at least our
Well, I
representatives to
wonder
be in this
too,
room.
like what's the motivation behind a lot of these podcasts that are coming out? Is it just to get the information out there, to get some of the more credible personalities, their story out on a broader level? What do you think, actually?
Yeah, I mean, because even now Jeremy Corbell and Knapp just announced a new podcast as well. Everyone's everyone is doing something, and again, we face that saturation problem, right? Where the information, the waters of the information will become muddy, because everyone will just be. I've always said that that's the problem with these platforms is you give everybody a voice, which is a great thing, but it's also you giving everyone a voice, and that can be a bad thing, right? Because with everyone comes the bad ones too. So, it's everybody jumping on the bandwagon, and podcasting is a good way to um, get information out and get people to hear you out in a long form setting, not just clip by clip, what you see on the news and what gets left on the cutting room floor of a documentary. It's the raw thing, and I think that's the draw, at least for audiences and creators.
So, are you coming out? Could you explain the Catalina Island? I'm just kind of coming in. Is it like a documentary, like a film that you're making?
So the thing that I'm doing, yeah. So what I'm doing is it's changing a little bit now, because of the addition of Mario. I didn't know if I was going to be able to get him in on it, and I had to choose to move forward without him, and then literally I am one day from stepping onto the island, and he fucking calls me, and he's like, "I'd love to do it," and I'm like, "Dude, my script is written, like everything's done. Literally just need to get everything on camera." Now he calls me. So I'm going back. It's being reworked a little bit. But Catalina Island is got first off, it's got a lot of us think, or at least believe, that this phenomenon really kicked up. Maybe it didn't start, but it really kicked off after World War II and the advent of the nuclear bomb, right? We can all agree on that. And Catalina Island has a history with World War II. It's been a hotspot for that area. Guadalupe Island, Catalina Island has been a super hotspot for many years. And just north of Catalina Island, there's an electromagnetic anomaly that is super rare, and it's specifically located right at the top of Catalina Island, or the northern part of Catalina Island, part closest to LAX. And they're just strange anomalies. And that's where roughly the Nimitz incident occurred with the Tic Tacs. So Catalina Island, something is happening there. And I chose to center my story around long lasting effects of encounters. So the Kevin Day and now Mario Woods, what do they both have in common? Well, they were both in the military. They both had encounters with what they assumed to be non-human intelligence, and they both had changes in their life that were not just physical but mental, and they changed them forever. Right? Their lives were altered because of the events that happened. So, that's what I'm exploring in this project, is those long-lasting effects, and what happens to people after they come in contact with these things. And Mario's a great case for that. And I cannot wait to be able to tell that story. But Kevin is a huge part of that story as well, because Kevin literally almost lost his life to what happened to him. He was ridiculed, laughed at, made fun of, basically laughed into retirement, not out of, laughed into retirement. And he went on a journey of like basically almost killing himself. And then one day something changed, and he looked on the TV, and there was the video of the Tic Tac, right? And it come out. The 2017 New York Times article had come out, and then Fravor stepped forward, and then Kevin stepped forward, and then Gary so things changed, and now he's in a good place, but it almost wasn't like that. And then Mario, same thing. So why are we hearing this story so many times from our military personnel? Why is it always them that have these life altering, and then they can't speak about it? They have to they have to hold it in for 17, 20 years. Imagine having some form of proof or some event like that and having to hold it in for 20 years. What that would do to you as a person is just you're gonna collapse. You're gonna from all the pressure, and that's why we need to change the field. Sorry, I went on a little rant. That's personal to me. It gets personal for me there because Mario and Kevin's stories are the two that I for some reason connect with the most. And I've been very lucky and grateful to be able to be in contact with both of them, and I'm going to Congress with each of them.
Good.
So
Hopefully
I am.
that
We
goes well.
know that Mario is going. Mario is one of the 8 selected to testify in front of Congress. So I have been invited to go with him as well. Kevin was not called, but we expect him to get a call. And he said if he does, then I can tag along with him as well. So I mean, it's just gonna be.
That's fucking awesome, dude.
Yeah, so it's gonna be so fucking dope, man.
Big things are happening.
Yeah, so this is a project that I'm having a meeting right after this to get money for it. Like I'm getting it backed. That's how large it got. So, and that's why I wanted to talk to you. Because what's your interest with music and all this? Because you do the music aspect as well, right?
Yeah, I really a lot of my music interest, it comes from people like Tom DeLonge. I guess you would say like
That's so funny.
Logic, Tom DeLonge, that aren't doing. I would expect Tom DeLonge to be making music about UFOs right now, right?
Right,
like
right. You'd
releasing
think.
music.
It only makes sense.
Yeah. So a lot of my motivation comes from my desire to have an artist make, and I guess you would call it like a genre, kind of like spacey, cosmic type of music that talks about UFOs, that just brings it to the forefront, that has that
Good.
type of sound to it. But I guess
I've
that's my
listened to it.
motivation to it. Yeah. I've got a audio engineering background. When I was in Atlanta, the second day I worked at a recording studio, Lil Wayne came in. So
No
I was
way.
yeah. Oh, dude,
What was that like?
the type of artist. So even months later, I was able to just be in sessions with like Bruno Mars, people who are songwriters,
shit,
to just
man.
see the creative process,
Holy
of
shit.
how they would work and come up with songs from the songwriter perspective to producers. I was a heavy producer at the time, so I would be all about the producers making the beats and the music, but just to see
Right.
how it would be recorded, to then hear it on the radio. I think it was very cool to then bring into the UFO spectrum of like, damn, nobody's making music about UFOs or like any
Right.
type of consciousness type
Like
of
talk
shit.
about an
Yeah.
untapped market.
Yeah.
And
It's
you were
fun to write
featured.
music about that.
You were featured in Vice as well, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I forgot to bring that up earlier.
Yeah, so I was active. I am active on Facebook as well. So there was a couple people who approached me about a show that possibly could be uh, pitched to Vice, and it was about my music, and just I am just such a follower of Robert Monroe in the Gateway series, and I've been interested in making my own binaural beats. So
Alright.
whether it's the soundscapes with the binaural beats in the background, or some of my vocal stuff,
Right.
a lot of what the episode was about just bringing my family out, like my dad, who doesn't believe in shit, like he doesn't believe in anything.
My dad
So
too.
like in-depth conversations of people who don't know anything about it, but see if their openness to it, to experience something new, to come out and to use the music to contact UFOs. And I think that also is a project that I'm working on going forward, is testing the different methods of CE5, of HEIS, to see if there's anything to it, scientifically, that we can look at.
I think that's an awesome.
I watched
awesome
it
thing.
earlier today too. I was eating lunch, and it's funny that you brought up the thing about your dad because on the website like that it was like right in the title and how his dad is not convinced or whatever it said. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
this is gonna be a fun ride.
My dad is the biggest, like you said, my dad is the biggest non-believer in my life. Like he attacks all my guests. He's gonna text me about you too. He's gonna be like, that guy's a fucking hack, dude. Nothing he said is fucking true. Like that's how he
Well,
is.
are you in Boston, Ty? Where are
Yeah,
you in? Like, I think
yeah,
you're in New England. So yeah,
I'm in
my
Boston.
parents live
Yeah,
in Martha's Vineyard. So one
yeah.
of the parts of it was us going to the vineyard and me taking my dad out for a CE5. And so he was like, yeah, I'm gonna get. So he finally goes out, and then we finally get him out for a CE5. And so the whole episode was them trying to have this point of tension for him because he didn't give a shit about it. I mean, so it was kind of like me trying to bring him out to be like, which I don't try to convince anybody. I just try to emphasize my curiosity in the topic, and hopefully that will get people interested in itself. And I think that's the key is like trying not to like have evidence to try and convince somebody, but to like, planting that seed to get somebody interested in the topic in themselves. I think that's important.
Very. And I laughed so hard when you said this because like all I could picture was me trying to bring my dad to CE5 and how much of a train wreck that would be. Oh my god, dude. I couldn't even imagine. Man. So is he still a non-believer?
So far, what's funny is so my mom is somebody who is very cool, very chill about it. So he's like, after 20 minutes of them filming, and keep in mind, there's like 5 cameras. My dad does like not want to be on camera at all.
Yeah.
So he's like, all right, I'm going to bed. I'm out of here. So my mom comes out, and all of a sudden, there's like stuff happening all over the place.
Oh,
My mom's open-minded. And so we're like, see,
it is your mindset.
Yeah.
Kevin said, by the way, Kevin Day has a really cool theory about intention and how intention could be a driving force for at least us to them, connecting with them. So, your intentions need to, some people say they need to be pure. You need to be open-minded to be able to pierce that veil. So I would love to explore that further. That's so funny, man. I can't.
Consciousness driven. Joe Dispenza wrote a book called Becoming Supernatural that you both should read because it involves very much meditation, intention, the power of positive thought and belief, and how if consciousness is kind of like the backbone of everything, like if you continue to think negatively about something, like you're not going to get the results that you want.
Right. And we can, I mean, there's the whole episode in that and just how thinking can, then we talk about random number generators and
it's a whole
all those experiments that have been done. But dude, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
This was fun.
Oh,
yeah.
Thanks for having me, dude. It's been a great discussion.
I put your links in the description below, but where can people continue the conversation with you, after?
Sure. Twitter, absolutely. I'm most active on Twitter at _Astral_. Also, theastral.com is my website where I really just try to be transparent and give information about my exploration into these topics, whether it's remote viewing, astral projection, extrasensory perception, or ESP research. I'll plug a couple of organizations too that I'm working with. The Ryan Research Center is the oldest parapsychology research center in the United States. Started out at Duke University, transitioned into an independent research center. So it's basically just a library in an office. And I think a lot of research centers are like that, including CCRI, Consciousness and Contact Research Organization, as well as UAP Med, which I mentioned earlier. And if you want any more information, just reach out to me. But I like to do a lot of stuff behind the scenes and work out. So any graphic design, video work, audio stuff, I'm willing to help out. organizations coming up just to contribute. So
Mhm.
feel free to reach out to me, man. And also with the audio stuff, I know you mentioned with your video stuff, I'd love to help out and contribute with the audio stuff as well.
Yeah, and I want it to be a community-driven thing, community-driven project. That's why I specifically asked UFO Twitter for help on that, and I'm glad that you heeded the call, if you will, because I want this to be something that we can all be proud of, and I want these two guys to be able to look at this and be like, the story was told correctly. Because I don't know if anyone knows this, but Unidentified embellished a lot of the stuff in the Mario Wood segment, adding a lot of fluff to it, and a lot of things that didn't happen. Specifically, like their weapons being taken away from them never happened, but was added in there for fluff. The Discovery Channel, they did it a little bit better, but it wasn't on a large scale, so not a lot as many people saw it as Unidentified. So all these companies are reaching out to Mario and to try to tell the story. And I think I don't know why I don't know why he's talking to me, but I've pitched him an idea, and we liked it. He liked it, so that's where we're going, and I can't wait. And I'm glad to have you aboard.
Awesome,
Tom,
dude.
With Thomas's name, when I typed out on the thing, it doesn't make them look any different. But those are
the
zeros.
Yeah, because I've been wanting to change my Twitter handle for so long because I think it's stupid.
Well,
I
I
want it
try
to just be Cortex Zero like
yeah,
everything else.
the font that I go with, like the 0 and the O, do not look anything different.
No,
So
but that's why I
did
always
both.
mention it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Where can they find you?
So I'm very active on Twitter, obviously, Atomic Thomas, and as we are saying, it's spelled with zeros. My YouTube channel, there's tons of stuff happening in the background with that. A lot of stuff is about to be uploaded, so keep an eye on that. And of course, my company website, ZeroDigitalDesigns.com, and my podcast, which is on Spotify. It's Podcast Zero. It's on like 20 million different platforms. Astral, I would like, since we're we both do music and everything, and obviously we've crossed paths on Twitter like a million times, dude. Like collab. Like me and Ty met randomly. He messaged me one day. Obviously, like all three of us know each other. Like
Same way I did it to him.
let's just make some things. You know what I mean? Like
Hell
let's
yeah,
just
absolutely.
have some fun, right?
Yeah, it's the same way I reach out to
Hell
everyone.
yeah.
I literally reach out to anyone and everyone. Like and just not to say that you're anyone or everyone, but like someone I want to talk to, I just say, "Hey, I want to talk." And if they say, "Hey, I want to talk as well." I'm like, "Yes, cool. Awesome. Let's do it." And it's usually really fun. And I love hearing people's perspectives and their theories, and I know I can over talk sometimes. That's why I do a podcast, so I can just fucking talk, so I can vent, and that way no one else has to hear me ever again. People in my life literally are like, "Dude, go do a podcast or something," because like you're talking too much to me, and I don't want to hear it.
Got in trouble at school for it.
Yeah,
he's a talker.
Yep, I was a talker as well. But no, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope this is the first of many times. We'll talk further about that other project as well. And again, thank you to all the future listeners. The Spotify, and so specifically Apple Podcasts and Spotify, the numbers lately just keep soaring. And I encourage everyone who's listening on an Apple device to rate the show on Apple Podcasts. It definitely helps a lot more than you think, and it's free. It literally costs you $0 to hit that button and rate the show. So, and that goes for as well as Spotify, or any platform that you listen on. It really does help the show. Or you can support further by becoming a member, and or using one of our codes for TubeBuddy and Movie Palette. Movie Palette's a good gift for nerds. I'm a nerd myself, as you could tell. So, can you tell?
Can you tell?
No, you can't tell.
I love those, by the way. Those are so cool.
Yeah, this is every scene in Captain America: Winter Soldier, color graded.
That's awesome.
And put into sequential order. So,
fantastic.
No one even knows it's nerdy. You can use it as a cool centerpiece or just a gift for a movie buff. Use code Culture Corner 15 for 15% off at checkout. Again, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. I'm trying to work on a catchphrase, because did you notice Everyone always
Everybody has a
says,
catchphrase.
no. But specifically in the because I used to have one. We do it for you. We do it for the culture because our name was Pop Culture Corner, right?
Right.
Everybody in the UFO community says, "Fucking keep your eye to the sky." I want to find something that's different than that.
Good
But
advice.
submit your answers, I guess. If anyone
So
has a
like
good
disclosure's right around the corner.
Yeah. And because you got to have like a tagline before you hit the outro, right? And now it's awkward if I don't have one, but I don't want to say keep your eye to the sky anymore because everyone says it. So,